Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session, Beyond the Content Filter, Cyber Safety and Security for K-12 Schools. My name is Katie Fritchen, and I will be your host today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees are muted. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact us using the Q&A panel on the right hand of your screen. Yes, this webinar is being recorded and will be available shortly afterward. All attendees will receive a recording via email within 24 hours. Yes, there will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to chat in any of your questions using the Q&A panel, and we will get to as many of them as possible at the end of the session. Today, we are going to talk about the cybersecurity and safety challenges of cloud-connected schools. And then we're going to talk with Tim Miles at Steamboat Springs School District about how he and his team are addressing some of these challenges. And then again, we'll have a Q&A session where you guys can get your questions answered. Today, we'll be hearing from David Waugh. He's our sales leader here at Managed Methods. David has over 20 years of experience in software and technology sales, and he is joined by our guest presenter, Tim Miles. Tim Miles has over 20 years of experience as well, both in enterprise and K-12 IT leadership. He is an active leader in the K-12 IT and data community, and we are super excited to have him here today. So let's get started. David?
Well, thank you very much, Katie. Appreciate that introduction, and we'll go ahead and get going. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Good morning to those of you joining us in the Pacific time zone, and good afternoon to the rest of you throughout the Mountain, Central, Eastern time zones here in North America. And of course, good evening to those of you joining us from Europe. We do have some participants coming from overseas. Before we get started, on behalf of the entire team here at Managed Methods, we wish everyone well-being and good health during this scary pandemic situation of COVID-19. Our world is dealing with a serious issue right now, and we're scrambling to address this and wish you all well in that situation. Apologize one moment, we got a little bit of feedback. We're going to try and get that taken care of. All righty. Before we start, we'll go ahead now and jump into this. Thank you very much for everyone for joining us. Again, my name's David Waugh. I'm the sales leader here at Managed Methods. As Katie mentioned, I'm in this role. I'm very well aware of the risks and challenges that are facing K-12 school districts today when it comes to cybersecurity and other measures. But I also live, eat, and breathe and sleep this through my personal life. I am a parent of 2 school-age children. I have a son in middle school, a daughter in elementary school, who have both been using Chromebooks and Google G Suite since they were in kindergarten. So I see this day in and day out. I get kind of the triple whammy, because then I have also my spouse. My wife's a digital librarian paraprofessional in the elementary school where my children work. So I'm dealing with this through my work, through my children, through my spouse, and thus live, eat, and breathe and sleep this every day. Very passionate about it. Managed Methods, our company, we are a cybersecurity company providing cybersecurity, safety, and compliance solutions to K-12 school districts that are using Google's G Suite and Microsoft Office 365 cloud products. We protect over 1 million students across 650 plus schools in North America and a few international locations. And what we're really doing is helping bring greater visibility, control, monitoring to these K-12 environments using these applications. Our company is based in Boulder, Colorado, and we launched our K-12 platform into the spring of 2017, and our very first K-12 customer was indeed our friends from Steamboat Springs joining us today. Today's webinar is to discuss some of the many challenges that we face when talking to K-12 administrators and technology leaders about our cloud-connected world. K-12 schools are implementing and using cloud applications such as Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, cloud-based student information systems, online teaching, curriculum tools, etc. More and more schools are moving to one-to-one with devices such as Chromebooks, PCs, and other types of cloud-connected devices. And students and staff are connected 24/7 to their school and their school accounts, whether it be through personal devices, whether it's through smartphones, family computers, etc. This has created many new challenges for IT departments in not only supporting and maintaining these systems, but providing security and controls around them. So let's now narrow this discussion down into 3 areas challenging our K-12 leaders today, and that is cybersecurity, cyber safety, and compliance. So let's start with cybersecurity itself. Both are very important topics, but we'll jump into the cybersecurity piece first. Cybersecurity, by definition, is the protection of the technology infrastructure and the data within those systems. This includes the local and wide area networks, Wi-Fi networks, the devices connected to them, the software on them, and including the cloud connected applications. This also is including the data contained within those systems, such as person identifiable information and more. When we talk about the cyber security side of things, we're also having to deal with the technology and the different components of these technologies. So when we dig into this a little bit more, for example, if we jump here to this next slide, we see that there's been an increase in threats within that environment. According to the 2019 Verizon Data Breach Incident Report, education is still now in the top 5 most targeted and attacked, along with public sector, healthcare, finance, and retail. Education continues to be plagued by errors and social engineering and inadequate secured systems, and there's more and more incidents being reported. According to the Verizon Data Breach Report of 2019, there was over 380 incidents reported, with 99 of them confirmed with data disclosures. In those breach situations, many of those scenarios involved both internal and external breaches, and a lot of the motives were not just around financial and espionage against the school district, but also trying to gain personal credentials of the students and staff. In fact, schools are a treasure trove of person identifiable information, and most kids' information, especially under the age of 18, has a clean credit record. So the hackers are trying to steal that information and build up their database of information they can use tomorrow, next year, 2-3 years down the road. And of course, coming up, we're approaching tax season, where much information of the school district and the staff is vulnerable, such as W-2s, 1099s, etc. To give a little bit of a visual to this, courtesy of our friends at the K-12 Cybersecurity Incident Map and EdTech Strategies, this map here gives you a visual interaction of cybersecurity related incidents in the United States in K-12 school districts since 2016. As you can see, there's been excess of 790 incidents reported, and that's just the keyword, being reported. So if you're not familiar with this, I encourage you all to take a look at this and get familiar with it. You can learn a lot about what's happening out there when it comes to cybersecurity within the education environments. Now let's look at the other side of the coin here when we talk about the cyber safety, cybersecurity, and that is cyber safety itself. By definition, cyber safety is about protecting the physical and emotional well-being of students, faculty, staff, and any other member within the district using the technology. This is protection against explicit contents, threats, violence, harm, cyberbullying, you name it. And this may happen to occur in emails, shared documents, and other content on these various systems. Bullying and cyberbullying threaten students and physical emotional safety and can impact the social and academic success of the school. There's a number of reasons behind school violence, and in some cases it's because of being victims of bullying. In addition, studies have shown a rise in substance abuse, suicide, and other physical and mental harms as a result of the growing problem of cyberbullying. In April of 2019, a report was published by the National Center for Education Statistics website that showed a study where over 20% of students between the ages of 12 and 18 said that they were bullied at school, and over 34% of that youth reported that they had been cyberbullied online. There's a lot of really valuable resources and good resources out there available to K-12 school districts, and some of those we'll share here in the bottom corner of this screen. For the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Education, Department of Justice, and the Department of Health and Human Services have created schoolsafety.gov to share a lot of actionable information and recommendations to school districts. In addition, the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center has recently published a document on a cybersecurity K-12 fact sheet that is available to schools, and you can access that information through these links. Now, the third piece of the component is the compliance side. So IT departments and school district leaders have to deal with not only the cybersecurity and the cyber safety, but with the use of that technology, we have to deal with the compliance challenges, dealing with the law itself. So of course, federal law has been out there. There's many laws on the books, starting with the FERPA law, the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. Of course, there's COPA, the Children's Online Protection Act, and CIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act, both that were enacted in 2000. There's a lot of great resources also available about this. We encourage everyone that is maybe not as familiar with all the laws, especially your state laws, to visit our friends over at the FERPA Sherpa website, which is an initiative of the Future of Privacy Forum. There you can find not only information about the federal laws, but a full listing of all the state laws on student data privacy. Here in the state of Colorado, our home state where we're speaking to you from today, we passed the Colorado Student Data Transparency and Security Act in 2016. And our next speaker, Tim, was instrumental in that in part of his role with the Colorado State COSN chapter. In addition to our national and state laws, we have to be aware of the international laws, such as the General Data Protection Regulations that are coming over from Europe. These impact any schools in the US where either you have students that you're hosting as exchange students from countries governed by GDPR, or you have students that are on exchange in one of those countries. With all the above on these, of these federal, state, and international, talk to your school's legal counsel on such matters. So you're now probably saying, okay, David, I hear you, but when we talk about these different items, my district's got a firewall. We've done training on compliance. We've done training on phishing. We're doing training on cybersecurity, cyberbullying. My district has a content filter in place, but oh, wait a minute. What about Google? What about Microsoft? Aren't they taking care of this for me? Well, the reality is all of the above are good to have, but the reality is there's still more that needs to be done. A lot goes into this. You know, in this graphic, we depict a cutaway of a school. And if any of you have ever been involved with a new school rollout or building anything, there's a lot of different layers that go into the school, just like there's a lot of different layers that go into cybersecurity. So let's now kind of dive into that side of the equation. These are three of the more popular layers that many of you are dealing with when addressing cybersecurity, safety, and compliance within your school district. You have firewall technology doing content filtering. You have content filtering at the endpoints. You have maybe a cloud application security layer looking inside of Microsoft or Google or other apps. Content filters are really kind of the safety workhorse inside of a school, be it a firewall, a content filter on external devices. And that's because of E-rate and CIPA and different types of federal programs. CIPA, of course, requires school districts to have technology that blocks or filters students' internet access to inappropriate content in order for the district to participate in E-rate programs. But as a result, schools usually have just a firewall handling this, and in some cases they may have an endpoint on that. But there are also, there are also other reasons that you need to go beyond that of the content filters and some of the legacy technology that's there to extend beyond it. Different types of content filters do different types of things, and content filters are limited in the number of ways that you can secure some of these different components. Traditional content filters typically can't police a school's shared drive or emails, and so it's better to have different layers in there so that you can have overlap versus gaps. So many of you that may be on this call today, you may say, all right, well, we've got our firewall. It's working on our physical and connected networks. We have then a content filtering layer looking at endpoints and devices. But cybersecurity in schools is a bigger challenge than just the content side of things and filtering what goes back and forth. So we advocate taking it to another layer and looking at what's happening inside of the cloud application itself and not what's just going back and forth through, say, the browser or what kids are surfing. So with that said, what we're going to do is transition over and talk about some real world sets of examples with our guest today, Mr. Tim Miles from the Steamboat School District. Some of you may be familiar with Steamboat Springs, Colorado. It is known as an outdoor adventure playground, both for ski resorts and summer activities. North America's oldest operating ski area is in Steamboat Springs, the Howelson Hill ski hill, as well as the more famous Big Brother Steamboat Resorts, the home of champagne powder that you see there maybe in the background. Our next guest here, Mr. Tim Miles, is the Director of Technology for Steamboat Springs School District in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. It's a school district of approximately 3,200 students, 300 faculty and staff, and they've been using Google Education since 2012. In addition to his leadership role with with Steamboat, Tim is a respected leader here in the K-12 community, both in Colorado and nationally. Tim is the past president of the Colorado Association of Leaders in Educational Technology, which is our state chapter of COSIN, the Consortium of School Networking. During Tim's tenure with Calais, Tim was a champion involved with the student data privacy work that I mentioned earlier, which led to the state of Colorado passing the 2016 law we have on the books, the Student Data Transparency and Security Act, which puts Colorado as one of the leading states who has passed laws on student data privacy. Hello, Tim. Thanks for joining us today in this discussion. I know it's been a bit of a crazy day and a crazy week for you folks there at Steamboat, just like all of our other school district friends out there dealing with this pandemic. So we appreciate you taking time to join us, Tim.
Hello, David. Hello, everyone out there. Thank you very much, David, for having me.
You're quite welcome. We're glad to have you. So, Tim, let's kind of jump in. You've heard me talking about these three different areas: content filtering, firewalls, as they pertain to things like compliance, cyber safety, cybersecurity. Why don't you give us first some background on your district and some of the perspectives and unique challenges that you're having to address there in Steamboat?
I can do that. We're a resort destination, and we're also one of the leaders. Well, we produce the most Olympians ever that come from Steamboat Springs on the winter sports side, skiing. So with that, we have, we're unique because we have a lot of people traveling, and we always have. So I could have tens of travelers, or I could have hundreds of travelers around the world in some sort of skiing or some sort of sporting event at a very high level. So we've always had to deal with that. We're unique in that our schools are relatively close. So the wires and all that stuff are easier to manage and connect because we're in a town. I do manage another school district 30 miles south of us. That's a little bit, adds a little bit more of a challenge because it's a different set of rules and different set of people, but pretty much we're a resort destination. And so people want to come here. And on top of that, we're a very high performing school district. So our standards are extremely high in comparison to maybe other districts. And we have to live up to that on a daily basis, having kids safe and access to the things they need to succeed.
Well, thanks, Tim. You definitely do have some unique challenges due to a lot of the travel and a lot of the remote students and staff members. You know, I've been up to Steamboat, and I know the vast amount of land between the different districts or schools there within that district. Now, as it pertains to today's conversation, could you maybe elaborate for our audience and tell them about your security stack and how you're addressing some of these different layers?
So all those on the phone, I'm assuming most of you are like me, you're tech-minded, so you know the changes in which tech has done over the past few years. I have gotten ransomware 3 times, twice at one school, and one at that other district I mentioned that's south of us. And that was back in the old days when we used to all have our files and applications inside of our network. So 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, we added the next-gen firewall. Huge change. I remember when I purchased the big Sonic wall. Prior to that, it was the Big Daddy they had at the time. It was $20,000, and that was probably 10 years ago or so. Maybe slightly, yeah, about 10 years maybe. And then I just recently purchased, like I said, 3 or 4 years ago, the next-gen firewall, and it was roughly $120,000. So that's the advances in the technology and the things they need to keep out there. So I added that, and I went with who I felt and still feel is one of the better ones out there is Check Point. At the same time, a year later, we added managed methods for no other reason than to scan our email. So it does all our sandboxing. So an email doesn't get to me until it goes through the sandbox, and all the links and whatnot are filtered and checked before it arrives on my desk. And then at that same time, we moved all of our files to Google. We held out on moving to Google. We were slower than most districts were because I knew the needs of my district were a little bit different than the rest, and the expectations in Google was just, I'll say, elementary at that time. And since I've done that, I haven't got a ransomware attack or any kind of malware whatsoever. No little virus, no any of that kind of stuff since I've added those two things. And I don't know which one's the best at it, but between the two of them, it's worked. Internally, we do a lot of phishing training with our staff. I haven't went as far as actually testing it with a company, but we just do a lot of training, and I constantly am on top of them to remind them about being wary of emails. And then on top of that, we're currently going through a network review now that everything is outside of us. There's very little need, and I call it going sideways, for any user other than me as a tech person to go sideways in the network. What I mean by sideways, accessing any server, accessing any services on that network. So the only real service that they need to do on my network would be printing. And that's very minimal. So if someone wants to go ahead and try to hack a printer over port 900, then go for it. And I'd like to see what you can do when you do that. So we're getting very specific. So we're going through all our networks and we're minimizing the direction that people can go on them. And we're very being cautious of which users can do what. On top of that, we've introduced 802.1x on the Wi-Fi and the wired side. So you need two forms of identity to get on the network, not necessarily like your phone where you have two forms of identification where you actually go to a website and then it pings your phone, not that level. But I need to know two things about you before you're going to get on my network. And as an example of the Wi-Fi, if it's my computer, then I have a certificate on it. And in addition, I know who you're logging on as. So those are the two forms. If you're a guest, I don't know two forms of things on you as a guest. I ask you a couple questions, then you can go, but then I have the network secured that you can only go outside. And I'm doing that as well on the wired side as the Wi-Fi side. And then on top of that, like I said, we brought in managed methods a few years ago for the email sandboxing. We are using it a lot more than just the email sandboxing now. And so between Lightspeed, which is my content filter, and that's an evolving challenge, I'll just say that because we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the web now is secure. So most of everywhere you go is HTTPS, and that's caused, no matter what the website or the filter company is, challenges in trying to watch that traffic. But I review my applications through Lightspeed and or managed methods so that I know exactly what's my audience is using and the threats they cause me, or if there are threats at all.
So Tim, there, when you specifically, when you say review applications, could you elaborate a little bit more to the audience which applications you're referring to?
Applications that are student facing primarily. So on my iPads, I use Lightspeed's MDM as well as the content filter. And so it is aware of everything that's Apple facing for me. And Managed Methods then is aware of everything else that goes through my Google G Suite. And like I said, we're all Google now. So my students are solely 100% Google. And so I'm aware of every application that they're exposed to.
Okay. Well, thank you. So if I'm hearing this correctly, then we're talking about a lot of different layers, kind of as we've been kind of leading up to and talking to. So can you now maybe walk us through when it comes to things of content filtering? You have right now 3 different types of technologies you've mentioned that are doing some various forms of content filtering, either at the firewall layer, at a MDM and device layer with the vendor you just mentioned, as well as now, of course, inside of the Google G Suite layer through us. So could you maybe elaborate more on how you've built in overlaps to eliminate gaps and how these content filtering layers are applicable to each other?
Yeah, sure. The content filter has been around for quite a while. And it was designed for CIPA, and it's done a great job at that. And CIPA is the Children's Internet Protection Act. Until the recent past, the only thing outside of our firewall was the internet. And just as you use the internet today, that's all it was used for. And the files and applications just recently have moved beyond the firewall. So prior to that, they were inside of my network, thus a few years ago, the ransomware, and the ransomware that happens in companies now and or schools that haven't moved their stuff outside. That is why, because there's an actual physical box with all that data on it, and that makes that box very attractive to some people. And then also internet usage has gotten harder to monitor because of that HTTPS, now that everything's encrypted on there. So the filter's been around for a long time, but we've evolved past the filter. So now that my files and my applications are actually outside of that filter, the filter wasn't designed to do that. Now it's evolved, or it can attempt to do some things other than just the traditional internet traffic inspection, but it was never designed, nor was it intended to actually look at my files, who has access to my files, who has access to my data, or any of that sort of stuff. It was just kind of live through report bases, in the history of where did they go on the internet and what did they do. It wasn't actual day-to-day operations of usage was it meant for. And that is where I evolved into this cloud application security. And I really talked to all the other tech directors around me, is that who felt comfortable about everything they didn't know. And since most districts have gone to Google or Office 365, they just assumed Microsoft and those other companies would handle them and secure them fine. But like I said before, I have all these applications in my MDM that I push towards my Apples and in Google. And I'm just a small school district, and I'm pushing upwards of 800 and some applications that my students are exposed to, and I'm just a small school district, so I can't imagine what some of these other school districts are larger than me. And I don't know what I don't know. I don't know who's given privilege. Just like when you had an app on your phone, you go through to get that annoying message out of your face that says, "Hey, do you really accept this app to be on your phone?" And you say yes, but no one ever reads the stuff behind it. And that was the challenge that was scaring me and keeping me up at night. Was they have rights to your Gmail, they have rights to your Drive, they have rights to your camera, they have rights to, and under those laws that you had mentioned before, I am obligated and legally obligated to protect those files from the people that don't need to see them, whether they be bad or good, and you don't have the rights to see that stuff. And I don't know what I don't know. So all these applications that were on my Chromebooks and my iPads that these teachers and our students just said okay to that warning message. Well, that warning message was giving them full rights to their email or full rights to their Drive. And that is, without a managed methods like application, there's no way of knowing that. There just isn't, in my opinion. And that's why you need this extra form of protection outside the content filter.
Well, thanks, Tim, for sharing that. So looking at these different layers, and as we've gone through this, through today's webinar, and in these last couple of slides you've talked about, you have to have these different layers for you to feel comfortable, even in a district of your size. And when you go then from, again, you talked about originally just at the firewall and the internet, then the firewall, now the content filter is the internet, but then you bring the Google, in your case Google, but in some other schools, Microsoft cloud environments into the mix. What you're indicating now is that you needed to have this additional layer because you couldn't see such things as third-party apps, and you weren't able to see, what those apps were giving access to. You weren't able to see some of the file sharing that it evolved around. And with all that said, one of the things that triggered this was the laws that were passed in Colorado back in 2016.
Correct. I had no real good way of knowing on the Google side what applications were exposed to which audiences that I was serving, whether it be young kids, middle-aged kids, high school, or staff. It was very difficult.
Okay. So within your environment today, you've got all of these different areas for providing content filtering, for protection against threats from the outside, whether it be through the email. You talked about the overlaps between what we're providing you on email, what your firewall, next-gen firewall provides. We now talk about the different types of components between the content filtering and the cloud application security layer. All of these things are an integral part of your security stack there at Steamboat Springs. Is there additional areas now today that you're looking into that are popping up as a result of maybe right now with COVID-19 and some of the other scares that are happening?
The biggest challenge I see today for schools for this safety, whether it be cyber, physical, or any of that sort of stuff, is when that bad thing happens, and it's happened at a lot of bad schools, in my opinion, there's still no silver bullet to help us with where are our kids during the bad times. That's like during the crisis when we're in lockdown, where exactly are all the kids? So it's still a shuffle of paperwork of taking attendance and finding out who's in those rooms. So that's still something that we need to work on the education side and help anyone in these large areas. That is my biggest thing today. Regarding the COVID, now it's going to be where, guess what? We are going to be educating these kids at their houses. And you really need to know who's logged onto that computer. Is it the mom and dad's computer? Is it the aunt's computer, the uncle's computer? And are my logins, my at ssk12.org, being left exposed on computers that I have zero control over? So in addition to some of that physical security of where are the kids, I now have the security of when they're traveling and I can control it, they take one of my devices. So my sports kids takes my device, away they go over to Germany or wherever they're heading to go skiing, and it's kind of controlled. It's not so controlled when they're using potentially how they have my computers in their homes where other people are going to be logged onto them and or left logged in with my credentials. So that's kind of where this smarter software can then alert me through policies of this type of scenarios. How long has that Google account been logged in? Where is it being logged in from? How long has it been left idle? That kind of stuff. We can all manage that much easier through this third party, through your product. Simple as that.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Tim. I greatly appreciate the insight. And, you know, to everyone that's joined us today, you know, Tim, maybe you can elaborate this final slide here on some of the requirements and what you went through. Yeah.
So I've never gotten pushback. I'm very fortunate to have a superintendent who kind of gets it, and I went through a few, and I've been fortunate enough to, they all kind of have that same mentality. But if I do a bad job, therefore it's going to end up on my superintendent's desk at some point, and either they're going to be embarrassed or it's some legal issue or whatnot. So you really have to convince those that it's not all about the budget. It's what is the need, and then how do we get to that need, and does anything have to give, or do we have to find something else, some other way to fund this thing? And in the security world, it's a need, and I can convince. It was an easy convince for me because we already know that Microsoft's been hacked, Target's been hacked, all these other companies. There's a lot of them out there, and they're specialists. They are the best at what they do. We in education, we're generalists. You know, unless you're a really large school district, you don't have a security person on staff, and when you do, how good are they? So, especially my size district, we're generalists. I can't be good at anything. So, when you go to your budget meetings and whatnot, you really need to advocate for the things that keep you up as an IT person at night, and not be scared of the cost of it, because all of these things, when you get hacked, you will lose your job potentially pretty quickly if they get in and steal a lot of this important stuff. So we are never going to be smarter than there's always people smarter than us out there. And if those big companies with specialists can get hacked, we are going to get hacked. And therefore we need to do the best we can with the money we can. And so you just need to convince those that it's that important. And it really is that important. And you just have to, that's what we are here as directors for, is to make those hard decisions and fight those uphill battles on the budget. But you have to do it.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Tim. I can't agree more, both, you know, as somebody who works in this industry daily, and we see it, and we see the challenges. But again, as a parent with school-age children and a spouse in these schools, you know, I guess bottom line, no matter what you select, you know, what you do at your districts, we're trying to advocate you have to have a mindset of security and safety. Of course, you have to have a mindset of compliance as well for your districts. We appreciate everyone being a part of today's call and this webinar. Before we open it up for questions, we do want to remind everyone that Managed Methods is available for a free trial for those of you that have not taken a look at our product before or you're not familiar with us. As Tim described, his district's been using it now for several years, and we do help take that layer beyond the content filters, beyond the firewall, and take a deeper dive into your G Suite and your Microsoft environments, whether it be for cyber safety, whether it's for security, whether it's for compliance. We're here to help you. With that said, I want to open it up now to our audience. We're starting to see a handful of questions come in. So if you do have questions for either Mr. Tim Miles or myself, you can do it through the Q&A panel. And so we'll go ahead and take a few moments to take a look there. All righty. Tim, we've got our first question that's came in. I'm not sure if this would be for you or for me. I'm curious, with the money funding aside, why wouldn't a school district have these layers of protection?
I can take a stab at that. So when I first came into education, I came from the corporate world, and it was 17 years ago. It was really astonishing to me what, in the education world, at least in Colorado, what they didn't know. And what I mean by that is, it used to be typical that a tech would become a super tech, and then they become a super tech, and then they become the director. But they never really exposed to the industry and some of the things that were out there. And I would always get questions like, well, how do I get the principal buy-in? We just bought this product, and they really don't want to go for it because it's a change and that kind of stuff. I think some of that still mentality is still there. Now, that's not at all how I feel today. I feel that there's me and my peers are much stronger than when I first got into this education world. But I think some of that is still there. They're naive on some of these big companies will take care of them. Simple as that. Even there's some very big districts in here that I won't name names, but very large districts in this state that they don't back up their Google, even though their Google, all the documents is in there. And I think that's a big mistake, because your whole business runs on files. And when Google loses them or Microsoft loses them, that's a bad decision in my mind.
Thanks, Tim. There was another question out there. How is the Managed Methods software licensed? It is done on an annual subscription. The person also goes on to ask a question, is there anything required to install? Oh, now they see our slide. There is no agents, there's no proxies. It is a software as a service, Managed Methods that is, and it is licensed on annual subscriptions within your domain. Let's see. I think another question that popped up. Any other questions from our audience?
Yeah, there's quite a few here that I see.
Popping in here. There's, on the other screen, jump over here. What do you see students doing on your network that is most concerning? Well, Tim, I'm going to let you take that one.
They're little devils, and you got to get and give them credit and stuff sometime. What I see for the most part that's not what's most concerning is, where are these files shared? So they'll share it with all kinds of people, and that's where Managed Methods comes in and helps me on that. There's all kinds of stuff on a daily stuff with inside my network. They're trying to hack me. They're trying to do stuff like that. Or they'll use a Google Doc instead of a share, and they'll open up a Google Doc, I should say, instead of we don't allow texting and that sort of stuff, those kind of apps. So they will just open a regular doc and then share them within each other. So that's where we use Managed Methods to look at the words that they're saying inside those documents, whether it be names or whether it be swear words or whether it be that kind of stuff. They get creative with inside those documents. But most thing that scares me is the sharing of who have you shared that document with outside. And then through the automation of a policy, I'll say, nope, you're not allowed to share outside, or it's outside the whitelist, and it'll remove that share right away.
Yeah, I'm glad you took that one, Tim. I've seen and heard a lot of bad stories, whether it seems like it's harmless stuff like in a doc, but that also comes into things of cyberbullying and
Yeah.
other types of inappropriate content material. Another question somebody asked, does the Managed Methods platform support Microsoft as well? Yes, we support Google G Suite, and we also support Microsoft's cloud equivalents, their Exchange Online, email, SharePoint, and OneDrive. We offer up free trials for both Microsoft and Google. We also had a question that come in, can we help with the remote learning plans and some of the things that we're dealing with within the COVID-19 scare? Yes, we've had many districts that we work with. They like the fact that with the students being remote, in many cases, Tim, as you alluded to, if a school district's not one-to-one and being able to send students home with devices that are already secured through a content filter or MDM that the school district has, our platform can give insight as to all these things that Tim here has talked about as they access Google. So if somebody is trying to log in from a device that's not managed by the school into their Google environment, Managed Methods will still see that through the G Suite and can provide the same security layers as well. Because we're in G Suite or we're in Microsoft itself, we're not, we don't have borders on our technology like maybe a content filter or firewall that's only as good as the devices they're installed on. Another question's come up about how do we obtain buy-in from cabinet board superintendent members in a K-12 environment with regards to the importance of security. And I think, Tim, if you want to jump on that again, I think you already alluded to that a little bit, but this is a question of how do you get that buy-in?
This is how I get the buy-in from my staff when I'm talking about, because when I talk about it, it's boring. They've taught all day. I get them after work for 15, 20 minutes, a couple times a month. They don't want to hear it from me. But they certainly stand up and listen when I say, do you want your name in the paper as the reason why this security breach happened? Because that's what it will come down to, right? Tim Miles has done everything that I did, that I was supposed to do. You're the one that clicked on the email. You're the one that left your thumb drive or used a thumb drive when I encourage you not to, and you dropped it in the parking lot. You're the one. So when you put it in those terms, when they actually falls back on them and it's their name is going to be in the paper, they don't like that. And so then they start to listen and hear. And in this case, the buy-in for here, this is not an expensive product. It just isn't. It's well worth the money and compared to the risk. Just hands down, it is. It's pennies for the kids and dollars for the staff, and that's it. And that's what you pay for. But you get all of this insight into who's doing what. And what really got me was is I saw a teacher at a party, at a house party, and it was during the holidays, log into recipes.com, or a recipes app, I should say. I shouldn't say it's recipes.com, with their school district account. And that's what got me thinking of this whole thing. And then I went and I looked up the security practices of that app, and I was floored because it had ownership. It took ownership of the email. It took ownership of the drive. Now it didn't act on it that I was aware of, but it had ownership of that drive, which then had all that potential personal identifiable information in it. And for me, and at least in Colorado, we're by law obligated to protect that data. So therefore, it might be easier than it is for you, John, on getting that buy-in, because I do have a law on top of that too that I can easily throw out there to my superintendent.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, I think I remember that conversation about the app. We obviously have a lot of school districts that ask us, with our app investigation policies to help them look into that. And that leads to another question that we had from our audience here, asking questions about our capabilities for content inspection and data loss prevention. Yes, we do operate as a full DLP engine with the ability to not only detect, but take remediation and automated actions and then set policies up to do those things for you. So in the example that Tim just talked about, we can have a policy that would look for third-party apps, that are connected in via an OAuth token to your G Suite or Microsoft domain. And if it violates, even if it's something simple like Tim just talked about, a recipe app, but if it does have privileges that you as a district don't want in your environment, such as read, write, send, delete emails on your behalf, we can automatically revoke that app from your environment. Similar to file sharing or anything else, we are a full DLP engine as well that you can wrap policy and automation around. Can you provide a list of API permissions and extensions in use in your G Suite environment? If an application has been granted an OAuth token to your G Suite environment, the answer is yes. We would show you all of those apps, extensions, etc. in use that have been granted an OAuth token through your environment. Tim, I don't know if I stepped on toes there, if there was anything you wanted to elaborate on either one of those.
No, I think you got that handled both of them. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm looking before I call it a wrap. I think we've gotten all the questions now that have come in from our audience. We appreciate the overwhelming response to our webinar today. We had well over 350 registrants. We've had a very, very large turnout today. We know everyone worldwide, not just here in the United States or here in Colorado, but is dealing with a lot of uncertainty, especially how schools are trying to now figure out how are we going to continue to educate our youth in these times of crisis. We appreciate everyone joining us today. Tim, Miles, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're extremely busy dealing for a COVID-19 response and preparations. To everyone on today's call, thank you for attending. We wish you good health and safety and the best of your day today. So thank you for joining us.